The story of how Henri Bource was attacked by a shark is a gripping story that shows how dangerous the ocean can be and what could happen if you meet one of its most dangerous predators. Henri Bource was a young, daring surfer who went to the French territory of Reunion Island in the Indian Ocean to catch some waves. But what he thought would be a fun day on the water turned into a nightmare when a shark attacked him. The attack left him with serious injuries and a long road to recovery. It also brought attention to the ongoing problem of shark attacks in the area and started conversations on how to stop future attacks. This terrible thing should serve as a warning to anyone who goes into the ocean, and it shows how important it is to know the risks. Before moving on to the video, make sure to subscribe to our channel and also hit the bell icon. Henri and his team made preparations to travel to Lady Julia Percy Island, a remote offshore volcanic island located 22 kilometers from Port Fairy. The island was separated from the Australian mainland when the landmass moved away from Antarctica, and it was formed some 7 million years ago through violent underwater eruptions. Strong waves are broken up by the sharp rocks on the coasts of the island. The surrounding sea on the island is between 30 and 50 meters deep vertical. Cliffs are located on the southwest end of the island. In addition to its rocky coves, shore platforms, and ancient sea caves that are teeming with marine life and fascinating caverns, Lady Julia Percy is home to the greatest breeding colony of the Australian fur seal. In addition, the remote island serves as a habitat for seabirds that are uncommon even by the standards of the Australian flora and fauna. On the other hand, wherever there are fur seals, there is also one of the species' natural predators. This would be the day that would change Henri and his friends' lives forever. Members of the Victorian Aqualung Club, to which Henri belonged, and members of the Port Fairy Manta Skin Diving Club left Moyne River Wharf on board a commercial shark fishing boat. The filmmaker wore a black hooded wetsuit, which was not uncommon in those days. Eventually, the two groups arrived at the shores of Lady Julia Percy Island, where they were. The great white shark, unbeknownst, it wasn't exactly something the typical crowd would talk about right before diving into the ocean and putting themselves at the mercy of the waves. But Henri, along with his friends Dietmar Krupa and Fred Arndt, were rehashing a terrifying story about a gigantic great white shark. The terrifying story was about how a shark attacked and killed a man. Put a man on a boat in the middle of the ocean close to a remote island and you have the perfect ingredients for the most monstrous creature alive, even if it's only imagination. The creature was known as Big Ben, and although there is very little truth to most monster stories like this one, it was not hard to believe in this one at this time considering the thousands of fur seals one could perceive as far as the eyes could see. At this time, it was not hard to believe this. Henri entered the water at approximately 12:45 and began swimming in the deep sections. After shooting a film for approximately an hour, Henri returned to the boat at approximately 1:15. Henri was dissatisfied with his performance in his first film part, so he decided to try his luck in the industry once more. This time, he was joined by Dietra and Fred, who were both armed with shorthand spears. No one could have guessed that they would emerge from this dive having been irrevocably altered by the events that were to follow. While the three friends were enjoying a free dive, they discovered a bunch of seals playing in the waves. As soon as Henri began to film, he concentrated on a bull seal that was amid the harem. Suddenly, the seals fled and the rolling seas became still. Nevertheless, because of the low visibility in the water, the divers were unable to determine what was going on. They dove deeper, reaching a depth of 10 meters and hugged the bottom, but they were unable to locate the seals. Then they understood what they needed to make an ascent. Henri was able to break through the surface and his head appeared. However, an immense force struck him like a freight train the moment his head emerged from the water, and it knocked him unconscious before he could comprehend what was going on. Henri was aware of what had attacked him and threw his arms into the air to signal to the other divers. He screamed at the top of his lungs that it was a shark. Suddenly, he was torn through the water with incredible force and was dragged below. He couldn't do anything about it. The water erupted into chaos. The force pulling Henri down was so strong that his mask and snorkel were ripped off from his face. Then, in a split second, Henri desperately tried to reach for the creature's eyes, but the creature's large snout was getting in the way. As Henri scrambled his hand across the shark's face, he felt the searing pain of the shark's teeth puncturing his calf. However, Henri realized that there was a more pressing matter than the pain. Henri had been holding his breath for about 45 seconds while the onslaught continued. He was suffocating as the massive creature pulled at him and rolled him from side to side. Henri could remember the conversation he had on the boat about Big Ben. He was filled with fear and desperation, and then suddenly the tugging and rolling stopped. Henri could almost sense a moment of peace. He swam towards the surface and broke through, gasping for as much air as he could get. Henri was able to regain his concentration. Henri wasn't out of the woods yet because the shark was back for more after developing a taste for him. The creature approached him again, eager for another bite at the defenseless filmmaker, but Dietmar and Fred fought the beast off using their small hands. Dietmar and Fred reached Henri, but he wasn't out of the woods yet. At least 5 times, Spears the shark came back, and each time, Dietmar and Fred fought against it. The animal was so tenacious in returning at Henri that the hand spears were bent in the struggle. Eventually, the dive boat drove towards the ruckus. Jill grabbed the safety line, and Henri was ultimately pulled into the boat. Henri received first aid as soon as he was carried aboard the boat, and as he was bleeding heavily, the other divers moved him to the center and quickly put a tourniquet to his injuries. Even though there were still members on the island, the captain decided that Henri's situation was much more urgent and that they should head toward the hospital. The captain immediately called for help in a blood transfusion, and when they arrived at Port Fairy, there was already an ambulance waiting with a few liters of blood, according to the doctor. Henri had lost 3.5 liters of blood during the attack, and he was rushed to Warrnambool Hospital, where he was treated for his injuries. In addition, Henri considered the loss of his leg to be a stroke of good fortune because it allowed him to escape the shark's grasp and live. However, in contrast to the majority of great white shark attacks, which only involve a test bite, this particular shark was intent on devouring Henri alive and went back for him 5 separate times. If it weren't for Henri's friends, he would almost certainly have met his unfortunate end. That is the end of today's video. Like and share the video, and also comment below. Thanks for watching.